I was 15 when my own father locked the door behind me in a storm because he believed my sister's lie instead of the truth, and I almost didn't survive the 7 miles I walked that night. But what none of them knew was that the evidence would speak years later, that the lie was never about drugs or rebellion, and that the man asking for my forgiveness in a nursing home in 2024 was the same man who once chose convenience over his daughter. And this is the story of how I survived, uncovered the truth, and learned that the most powerful revenge is never going back. Chapter 1. The Night I Was Thrown Away. I was 33 when the letter arrived. It came on a gray afternoon in Boston, the kind where the rain does not fall hard but never really stops. The envelope was thin, cream-colored, my name typed neatly across the front. I recognized the return address before I even picked it up, a long-term care facility in rural Pennsylvania. I stood by the window for a full minute before opening it, listening to the rain tap against the glass, noticing how the air smelled faintly damp even inside my apartment. The letter was short. Richard Hartman wrote that his health was failing. He said he had been thinking a lot about the past. He said he wanted to apologize for the night in October of 2011. He asked if I would come see him. My hands were steady when I folded the paper back into the envelope. What surprised me was not the request, but the way my body reacted before my mind did. The tightness in my chest, the sudden memory of cold soaking through fabric, the sound of rain hitting concrete. It was raining like this the night my father threw me out. In October of 2011, I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore at Lincoln Public High School, worried about an upcoming biology test and whether we would have spaghetti or meatloaf for dinner. It had been an ordinary day. I walked home from school with my backpack heavy on one shoulder, thinking about nothing more serious than homework and sleep. The house looked normal from the outside. The porch light was on, even though it was still early evening. Rain streaked down the windows. I remember feeling relief as I pushed the door open, glad to be out of the cold. That relief lasted about 3 seconds. My father was standing in the living room, rigid, his jaw tight. In his right hand, he held a small stack of cash. In his left, a prescription bottle. My sister Vanessa stood a few feet behind him, her arms crossed, her face carefully arranged into concern. Linda was in the kitchen, pretending to wipe down an already clean counter, her back to all of us. Richard asked me where I had been. I told him school. He asked me if I thought I was smart. I did not understand the question. He held up the money and asked if I wanted to explain. I said I did not know what he was talking about. He did not lower his voice. He said he found the cash in my room. He said he found pills, too. He said Vanessa had been worried about me, that she had tried to help, that she could not cover for me anymore. Vanessa stepped forward then, just enough to be seen. She said she loved me. She said she had noticed changes. She said she had been afraid for me. She looked at our father the way someone looks at a judge, like the verdict mattered deeply to her. I tried to speak. I said the money was not mine. I said I did not use drugs. I said he could call my school, my teachers, anyone. The words came out too fast, tangled, desperate. That was the moment I realized he was not listening. His eyes did not move to me when I spoke. They stayed fixed somewhere past my shoulder, as if the decision had already been made, and my voice was just noise filling the room. He did not ask where the money came from. He did not ask to see my phone. He did not ask a single question that could have led to an answer. He did not call the school. He did not call the police. He did not check a bank statement or ask for proof of anything. He chose the explanation that was easiest for him to accept. He said he was done. He said he would not have that kind of behavior under his roof. He said he had tried with me and failed. I remember the sound of the zipper as he grabbed my backpack from the hall closet and shoved it into my hands. The force knocked me back a step. He opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pavement and leaves. He told me to get out. He said he was not raising someone like me. The rain was heavier than it looked from inside. It soaked through my sweatshirt almost immediately. I stood there on the porch for a second, stunned, waiting for him to change his mind, for someone to say stop. No one did. The door closed. I heard the lock slide into place. The porch light flicked off. I stood there with my backpack, feeling the cold seep into my shoes, my hands, my bones. I checked my pockets out of habit, even though I already knew. No phone, no wallet, no jacket. I was 15 years old, and my father had decided I was disposable. For years afterward, people would ask if I thought he meant it, if he was just trying to scare me. But there was no ambiguity about that night. This was not discipline. This was not a cooling off period. This was abandonment. I walked off the porch because standing still made it worse. The rain blurred the edges of the street as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I had no plan. I only knew I could not go back inside. Each step felt unreal, like I was watching myself from far away. The house disappeared behind me. The rain kept falling. Somewhere inside, my family went on with their evening. I kept walking, the sound of water splashing under my shoes the only proof that I was still there at all.
Chapter 2. 7 Miles in the Dark. The rain thickened as the sidewalks thinned, and the familiar part of my neighborhood gave way to long stretches of road where the trees crowded close, and the houses sat back in the dark, like they were trying not to be noticed. My sweatshirt clung to my skin. Water ran down my sleeves and gathered at my wrists. My fingers were already stiff, and every breath came a little sharper than the last. At first, I walked like I was still allowed to go somewhere, like this was a decision I had made, not something that had been done to me. I kept my head up. I kept my pace steady. I told myself I could figure it out. Then the reality started to press in. I had no phone, no money, no jacket, no plan. The street behind me no longer held a porch light that might flip back on, and the street ahead was nothing but wet pavement and dim lamps smeared by rain. I felt embarrassed in a way that burned hotter than my fear. Not just because I was out there, soaked and shaking, because someone had decided I deserved it. My father had looked at me and chosen the easiest story, Vanessa's story. I could still see her face, carefully worried, carefully controlled, watching him shove my backpack into my hands as if she were doing the right thing for everyone. The shame made me want to disappear. It made me want to hide my face from every passing car, from every window, from every stranger who might see me and guess something about me that was not true. I tried to tell myself to knock on a door, to ask for help, but even imagining it made my stomach tighten. I pictured a stranger opening their door just enough to see my wet hair, my shaking hands, and asking what happened. I pictured myself trying to explain while my teeth chattered. I pictured the moment they decided I was trouble and closed the door again. Vanessa had always been good at making people believe her. She spoke like she was protecting you. She cried at the right times. She sounded reasonable. I knew, even then, that if someone called my father and asked what was going on, he would tell them I was out of control. He would say he had no choice. He would say he was trying to teach me a lesson. So I kept walking. The only place I could picture as safe was my grandmother's house. Margaret Lewis lived about 7 miles away. 7 miles was nothing for a car, but it felt impossible on foot in the cold rain. Still, it was a direction. It was a name I could say in my head like a prayer. Margaret, Grandma, home. I turned onto a wider road where the shoulder narrowed and the traffic moved faster. Headlights swept over me and slid away. The spray from tires hit my legs, cold and gritty. My shoes squished with every step. My socks felt like rags soaked in ice water. I tried to count street signs to keep my mind from spiraling. I tried to focus on practical things, how far I had gone, how far I had left, whether there were any places to cut through. But my body was already changing in ways I did not understand. My arms started to feel heavy, my shoulders hunched forward without me meaning to. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. I noticed that my hands were curling into fists and I could not fully open them. I told myself it was just cold, that I could handle cold. Then a car slowed beside me. It came up quietly, matching my pace for a moment, close enough that I could hear the engine hum under the rain. I turned my head and saw a man at the wheel, his face washed out by the pale dashboard light. His eyes moved over me, quick and measuring, like he was deciding what I was. He cracked his window just a little, and I heard a few words through the rain, muffled and unclear. "Are you okay, maybe? Or where are you going?" I could not tell. All I knew was that the hair on my arms rose and my heart slammed hard enough to make me dizzy. I stopped walking. The car stopped too, for a breath of time that felt too long. I stepped back toward the grass, tightening my grip on my backpack straps. The man's gaze held on me, then slid away as if he had already lost interest. He rolled his window up and drove off, his taillights smearing red through the rain until they vanished. I stood there shaking, not sure if it was cold or adrenaline. The moment left a sour taste in my mouth. It reminded me that being outside was not just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. I was a girl alone in the dark, and no one was looking out for me. I forced my legs to move again. I kept to the edge of the road. I kept my eyes down. I tried to make myself smaller and faster at the same time. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time stopped behaving normally. The rain was constant, and the wind kept finding its way under my wet sweatshirt, pressing the cold directly against my skin. My breathing started to come in short, uneven bursts. I swallowed and tasted nothing but wet air. A thought came to me, soft and tempting. Sit down, just for a minute. Let your legs rest. Let your head stop spinning. It sounded reasonable, like the kind of idea an exhausted person would have, and that terrified me, because some instinct deeper than logic told me that sitting down was not rest, it was surrender. It was my body deciding it no longer had to fight. "Keep moving," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, thin. "Keep moving, Ellie." I tried to pick up my pace. My feet dragged instead. My vision narrowed to the white line on the side of the road and the wet shine of it under headlights. I blinked and saw spots. My fingers were numb enough that I could not tell if the backpack straps were cutting into my hands or if I was imagining it. When I reached Route 9, the traffic was louder, constant, the rush of tires on wet pavement like a river. The shoulder widened a little, then narrowed again. The lights along the road were farther apart. The darkness between them felt heavy. I remember thinking, with a calm that did not belong to me, that I could lie down for just a minute. I could close my eyes, I could let the rain hit my face and stop caring. My knees buckled before I finished the thought. I went down hard on the gravel shoulder. The impact jolted through my hip and shoulder. My cheek scraped against something sharp. For a second, there was no pain, only the shock of the ground being closer than it should be. Then the cold rushed in, seeping into my face, my hands, my chest. I tried to push myself up. My arms did not respond. My fingers would not spread. I made a sound that might have been my name or might have been nothing at all. Headlights flashed past. A horn blared. The noise seemed far away. Then I heard footsteps, quick and careful, crunching through wet gravel. A woman's voice cut through the blur, firm, steady. She told me not to move. She asked if I could hear her. She said she was calling for help. I turned my head slightly and saw her kneeling beside me, rain shining on her coat. Her hair was pulled back, and her face looked focused, not frightened, like she had seen something like this before and knew exactly what mattered. She pulled a thick blanket from her trunk and wrapped it around my shoulders. The warmth felt almost painful against my skin, like my body didn't trust it. My teeth chattered so hard I could not speak. She asked my name. I tried to say it. It came out broken. She leaned closer and told me to look at her. She said her name was Diane Holloway. She told me to squeeze her fingers. She told me to keep breathing. I heard her talking into her phone, giving an address, describing me, describing the situation. I caught fragments. Minor, hypothermia risk, stay with her. She did not move away. She did not look at her watch. She stayed right there, one hand on my forearm like an anchor. The ambulance arrived with red lights diffused by rain. Paramedics moved fast, their hands sure. They lifted me onto a stretcher and strapped the blanket tighter. One of them asked my date of birth. I whispered it. Another asked where my parents were. I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance and tried not to cry. At County General Hospital, everything became bright and loud. Nurses cut away my wet clothes, warmed blankets covered me. Someone pressed heat packs against my skin. My body shook violently, then slowly, grudgingly, began to settle. A police officer came in, calm voice, tired eyes. He asked what happened. My words came out uneven, caught between shivers and shame. I said my father told me to leave. I said I had nowhere to go. I said I was trying to reach my grandmother. The officer's expression tightened. He stepped out and made a call. I could hear his voice in the hallway, low and controlled. He said, "Child Protective Services." Diane appeared at the door, dripping rain onto the tile, still there. She spoke to a woman in a blazer holding a folder. The woman introduced herself as Rosa Martinez. She asked me questions gently, but her pen moved quickly, like each answer mattered. Someone said they had reached my father. I did not see him immediately. I saw the way the room shifted. Nurses moved with more caution. The officer stood straighter. Rosa's posture stiffened. Richard Hartman walked in like he was annoyed to be there. Vanessa was behind him, pale, her eyes wide in a way that looked less rehearsed than usual. Linda was not with them. Richard started talking as if volume could make him right. He said I ran off. He said I was acting out. He said he was teaching me a lesson. Rosa cut him off and asked why a 15-year-old was left outside in a storm without a phone. The officer asked if he
Chapter 3. The Perfect Daughter's Lie. Morning came slowly in my grandmother's house, as if the day itself was unsure whether it was allowed to continue. Pale light filtered through the curtains, turning the living room a soft gray. I woke on the couch wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of laundry soap and old books. For a moment, I did not remember where I was. Then my body caught up, and the weight of the night pressed back down on my chest. Margaret was already awake. I could hear her in the kitchen, moving with quiet purpose. A kettle clicked off. A mug touched the counter. She did not rush in to check on me. She let me wake at my own pace, and that alone felt different from anything I had known. When I finally sat up, she glanced over. "You cold?" she asked. "A little," I said. She nodded and set a bowl of oatmeal in front of me. She did not ask what happened. She did not ask how I felt. She waited, watching me with the calm focus of someone who understood that the wrong question could shatter a fragile thing. That morning marked the beginning of the after. Rosa Martinez arrived later with a folder tucked under her arm. She explained emergency protective custody in plain language, without urgency, but without softness either. She said this was temporary. She said there would be interviews and follow-ups. She said my father would not be allowed to take me back while the situation was under review. "This is about safety," she said, "not punishment." I nodded, though the words safety and punishment felt tangled in my head. When she left, the house went quiet again. I waited for my phone to ring, even though I did not have one. I waited for my father to show up at the door, furious or regretful. I waited for Vanessa to text, to apologize, to threaten, to explain. Nothing came. The silence gave my mind space to wander backward to the question that kept circling without rest. How did it get that far? How did my father believe her so completely? How did my sister know exactly what to say? The answers did not start in October of 2011. They started 2 years earlier. In 2009, my mother died of cancer. She had been sick long enough that the house learned how to whisper. When she was gone, the quiet she left behind was heavier than the illness itself. My father changed after that. He kept functioning on the surface. He went to work, he paid the bills, he made sure there was food in the fridge. But something essential shut down. He stopped asking questions that required effort. He stopped noticing small shifts in the people around him. He looked exhausted all the time, and when someone else took control, he seemed relieved. Vanessa was 14 then, old enough to understand what was happening and old enough to use it. She stepped into the space my mother left behind with remarkable ease. She started organizing things. She reminded my father about appointments. She answered the phone when he let it ring. People praised her for it. Teachers told my father how mature she was. Neighbors said he was lucky. Each compliment landed like another layer of armor around her. I was younger. I grieved differently. I cried when she did not. I struggled in school while she excelled. Slowly, without anyone ever saying it out loud, the roles settled into place. Vanessa became the reliable one. I became the problem. It happened in moments so small they were easy to ignore. A teacher calling about a missed assignments, and Vanessa explaining I had been distracted lately. A rumor at school that reached my father through someone else, softened by the time it got to him, with Vanessa presenting it as concern. A disagreement between us that ended with him telling me to stop being dramatic before I could explain. I remember one night at dinner when my father asked why my grades had slipped. I opened my mouth and Vanessa spoke first. She's been really sensitive lately. I've been trying to help her stay focused. My father nodded, relieved to have an answer that did not require him to dig any deeper. "See," he said, to me, "your sister is trying." I stared at my plate and said nothing. I had already learned that defending myself only made things worse. I sounded emotional. Vanessa sounded calm. Calm always won. Linda noticed more than she admitted. She would glance at me when Vanessa spoke, her mouth tightening for just a second. Once, when we were alone in the kitchen, she lowered her voice. "Try not to upset her," she said. "Upset who?" I asked. She did not meet my eyes. "Just keep your head down," she said. "Things will be easier." Her silence wasn't loud. It was constant, and it mattered. Over time, Vanessa's version of me hardened into fact. If something went missing, suspicion drifted towards me. If I came home upset, it was because I was overreacting. If there was tension in the house, it was because I brought it with me. I started apologizing for things I did not do. I started shrinking to fit the shape they expected. It was easier to be wrong than to be loud. There was one thing my mother left behind that no one talked about directly: money. Not enough to change a life, but enough to matter. I first heard about it in passing, my father speaking to an aunt in the hallway, the words trust and college floating through the house like something I was not meant to hear. When I asked him about it later, he waved it away. "Your mom took care of some things," he said. "It's complicated." Vanessa never denied it existed, she just never explained it. "Mom wanted us taken care of," she told me once, her voice gentle. "It's nothing you need to worry about." I believed her because I did not know how to question her. By the time I was 15, Vanessa's life was less stable than she wanted people to see. She had moved out earlier that year and was living with Caleb Monroe. He called himself an entrepreneur. He talked about big ideas and paid in cash. When my father asked what he did, Caleb smiled and said, "Whatever worked." Vanessa started coming back to the house more often. She asked to borrow money. She complained about stress. She laughed it off when my father noticed. "It's just a rough patch," she said. "I'll figure it out." After I ended up on Margaret's couch, the past rearranged itself anew. Rosa explained pieces slowly, never all at once. "Your mother set up a trust years ago," she said during one visit. "It was meant for education and support." My stomach tightened. "So there's money," I said. "There is," she replied, "and there are protections." Over the next few days, more details surfaced, not in dramatic revelations, but in careful explanations and overheard conversations. A clause, a condition, a phrase that kept coming back. not able to manage her own affairs. It took time to understand what it meant. The trust was designed to protect a child from making harmful choices. If a beneficiary was considered unable to handle responsibility, a guardian could control how the funds were used. It was meant as safety. It could also be used as leverage. The accusations from that night shifted in my mind. Drugs, theft, secret contacts. They weren't random, they were specific, serious enough to justify drastic action. I pictured Vanessa in the living room, watching my father more than she watched me, measuring, certain. The realization did not come with rage, it came with grief. One afternoon, sitting at Margaret's kitchen table, I said it out loud. She planned it. Margaret did not look surprised. "I know," she said. "That's why we're doing this carefully." I looked down at my hands, steady now, and felt something settle into place. Not relief, not victory, clarity. For years, I thought I was failing to meet expectations I could not understand. Now I saw that the expectations were never meant for me to meet. They were designed to push me aside. As rain began to tap against the windows again, I understood something I had never allowed myself to consider. The night I was thrown out was not a sudden mistake. It was the end of a long process, one shaped by silence, convenience, and a lie that had been told so many times it sounded like truth. For the first time, I stopped asking what was wrong with me. I started asking how long they had been preparing to let me go.
Chapter 4. When evidence started talking. The question did not leave me after that. How long had they been preparing to let me go? Once it formed, everything that followed seemed to answer it. The investigation did not explode into my life all at once. It moved in careful steps, the way serious things usually do. Rosa Martinez became a regular presence at my grandmother's house. She arrived with a notebook and a calm expression, never rushing, never filling silence just to make it easier. She explained that Child Protective Services had officially opened a case and that she would be handling it. "This is not about proving anyone evil," she said during one visit. "It's about facts." Facts turned out to be relentless. The first ones were small: dates and times, where I was supposed to be on certain afternoons, school attendance records, test schedules. Teachers confirmed that I had been in class the day the cash supposedly disappeared. They confirmed it without hesitation because to them it was routine. Routine mattered. Rosa explained the ATM footage to my grandmother first, then to me. The camera showed Vanessa at a machine across town, withdrawing $800 in cash on the same afternoon I was sitting in biology class. The timestamp lined up perfectly. There was no room to argue. I stared at the printed still image, my sister's face caught in a moment of concentration, and felt something strange loosen inside my chest. Not relief, recognition. "That's her," I said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "it is." The phone came next, the so-called burner that my father claimed to have found among my things. Store records showed it had been purchased 2 days before I was thrown out. The receipt listed a credit card tied to an address I had never been to. Caleb Monroe's address. Rosa did not raise her voice when she explained it. She did not need to. Each detail landed with its own weight. The phone had been activated briefly. Messages had been sent, not by me. Then there was the prescription. Caleb had reported missing medication after the fact. The timing was off. The pharmacy confirmed the refill date. The report came too late to support the story my father had accepted without question. Piece by piece, the accusations collapsed. As the investigation widened, it moved into places I had never been allowed to see. Financial records, account statements, transfers that did not match explanations. Over 3 years, more than $22,000 had been pulled, shifted, and spent without clear justification. Vanessa's name appeared again and again. So did Caleb's.
Rosa explained that this part would take longer, that money always did. She told us there would be forensic accountants involved, that there were limits to what could be said while things were still being reviewed. What matters, she said, is that the pattern is clear. The pattern was clear to me. While the facts piled up, my father was called in for interviews. I was not present for most of them, but I heard enough through Rosa and my grandmother to understand how they went. At first, Richard defended himself the same way he always had. He said he trusted Vanessa. He said she had never given him a reason not to. He said I had always been difficult. Rosa pushed back gently but firmly. "Did you check her claims?" she asked him. He hesitated. "Did you contact the school?" she asked. "No." "Did you contact law enforcement before forcing your daughter out of the house?" "No." At some point, the questions stopped being about me and started being about him. When Rosa relayed part of that conversation to my grandmother and me, she did not soften it. She told us he said he believed Vanessa because it was easier. Those were his words. Easier. Not truer. Not safer. Easier. Linda was brought in next. I was not there when she was interviewed either, but her words reached me later, heavy and unavoidable. She admitted that she had heard Vanessa say something strange the day before I was thrown out, a comment made too casually to be innocent. "Everything is ready," Vanessa had said. Linda had felt uneasy. She had done nothing. When Rosa told me that, I felt anger flicker for the first time. Not the wild kind, the quiet kind that settles into your bones. Linda had known something was wrong. She had chosen silence because silence kept her life intact. Her admission mattered. It shifted how the case was seen. It turned doubt into confirmation. By the time the court date arrived in March of 2012, there was no dramatic confrontation left to stage. The truth had already done its work. The hearing was brief. Vanessa's lawyer spoke carefully. Caleb was mentioned but not present. A plea deal was entered. Felony charges were accepted. Probation was assigned. There were no raised voices, no shouting, no emotional outbursts. Vanessa did not look at me. She stared straight ahead, her expression tight, her jaw set. The image she had built of herself as the responsible one, the concerned one, collapsed quietly in that room. I expected to feel something like triumph. I expected a rush. What I felt instead was emptiness. After the legal part ended, the social consequences followed in a way no one could control. Word traveled fast in a town that once praised my sister for her maturity. People stopped inviting my father to gatherings. Neighbors avoided eye contact. The church he attended found polite reasons to keep him at a distance. Linda moved out not long after. She said she needed space. No one argued. Vanessa disappeared from my life entirely. Through all of it, I stayed with my grandmother. I went back to school under careful watch. I answered questions when required and stayed silent when allowed. Adults around me talked about justice and accountability. I did not feel vindicated. I felt named. For the first time, what happened to me had language that fit. Abandonment, neglect, manipulation, choices. The night I was thrown out was no longer a mystery or a personal failure. It was an outcome, the end of a series of decisions made by people who found it easier to sacrifice one child than to confront another. One evening, weeks after the hearing, I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table, the house quiet around us. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the windows. "I don't feel like I won," I said. Margaret looked at me for a long moment. "You weren't supposed to win," she said. "You were supposed to survive." I nodded. That felt true. Everything had been said, everything had been proven. There was nothing left to argue. And still, the weight of it settled slowly, like a bruise revealing itself over time. I understood then that justice did not always feel like relief. Sometimes it felt like clarity. Sometimes it felt like the simple fact of knowing that what happened to you had a name, and that the name did not belong to you. Chapter 5. Forgiveness without going back. The understanding stayed with me longer than I expected. It followed me quietly into adulthood, not as pain anymore, but as something steadier, something that no longer demanded attention, yet shaped the way I moved through the world. I finished high school living with my grandmother. Pennsylvania felt smaller every year, like a chapter I had already read too many times. When I left for college, then later for work, I did not look back with anger. I looked back with distance. That mattered. By the time I settled in Boston, my life looked ordinary in the best way. I had an apartment I paid for myself. I worked a job that challenged me without breaking me. I had friends who showed up without needing explanations. I learned what consistency felt like. I met Ethan Cole in my late 20s. He was not impressive in the ways that once would have fooled me. He was simply present. When I spoke, he listened. When something confused him, he asked instead of assuming. When I told him parts of my past, he believed me without needing proof. That alone changed everything. Therapy was not a dramatic transformation. It was slow and sometimes boring. I learned how my body reacted before my mind caught up, how my shoulders tightened when someone raised their voice, how I apologized automatically when I had done nothing wrong, how silence could feel threatening even when it was safe. Over time, I learned boundaries, not as walls, but as lines that kept me intact. I learned that forgiveness was not an obligation, and that understanding someone's pain did not require me to accept their behavior. Most importantly, I learned that healing did not mean forgetting. I did not think about my father often. When I did, the memories felt distant, like photographs left in a drawer. They no longer dictated my reactions. They no longer defined me. Then, in the spring of 2024, I received the call. A nurse from a care facility in Pennsylvania told me Richard Hartman had asked to see me. His health was failing. He wanted to apologize. She spoke carefully, like someone used to making requests that might reopen wounds. I thanked her and said I would call back. I sat alone at my kitchen table in Boston for a long time after that. My coffee went cold. The city hummed outside my window, steady and indifferent. I waited for fear to rise. I waited for anger. I waited for the familiar pull to avoid, to protect myself by disappearing. None of it came. What I felt was calm. I realized then that I was no longer reacting from the place that had been hurt. I was choosing from the place that had healed. I called the nurse back and said I would come. The drive felt longer than it needed to be, not because I was nervous, but because I was paying attention to the road, to my breathing, to the fact that my body was not bracing itself. The facility smelled like antiseptic and overcooked food. The halls were quiet, lined with doors that looked identical. I paused outside his room, not because I was afraid to go in, but because I wanted to acknowledge the moment for what it was. This was not reconciliation. This was closure. Richard looked older than I remembered, smaller. His hands shook slightly as they rested on the blanket. His eyes searched my face when I entered, as if trying to recognize the person I had become. "Ellie," he said, his voice thin. I sat in the chair near the window. I did not move closer. He began speaking almost immediately, like he had rehearsed the words and feared losing them. He said he was sorry. He said he thought about the night he threw me out more often than he wanted to admit. He said he regretted his choices. I let him speak until the words ran out. Then I asked him something I had never asked before. Why did you believe her so quickly? The question hung in the air. He looked down at his hands. It was easier, he said quietly. She was calm. You were upset. I was tired. I didn't want to dig. The honesty surprised me, not because it was new, but because it was finally spoken without excuses. You chose convenience over truth, I said. He nodded. I failed you, he said, as a father. I agree, I replied. There was no anger in my voice, no accusation, just accuracy. He looked up at me then, eyes glassy, waiting for something else, comfort, reassurance,
permission to be forgiven. I forgive you because I meant it. The word felt light when I spoke it. I forgive you so I don't have to carry this anymore. His shoulders sagged with relief. He reached toward me instinctively. I stayed where I was. But forgiveness doesn't mean we rebuild. It doesn't mean I come back. It doesn't mean we have a relationship. He nodded slowly. I could see the disappointment, but I did not soften my boundary to protect him from it. I needed you to understand that. I'm not angry. I'm not seeking punishment. I'm just done. He said he understood. I believed that he understood the outcome, even if he didn't fully grasp the cost. We did not talk about Vanessa. We did not revisit the case. There was nothing left to clarify. The truth had already taken its place. When I stood to leave, he thanked me for coming. I wished him peace, not as a gesture of kindness, but as a statement of fact. Outside, the air felt lighter than I expected. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine, noticing the absence of tension in my chest. The meeting had not reopened old wounds. It had closed a door. The drive back to Boston felt different, not triumphant, just complete. That evening, Ethan asked how it went. I said, "It's finished." He nodded, accepting that without needing details. That night, I slept deeply. Looking back now, I understand something that took years to learn. Revenge does not always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like survival. Sometimes it looks like building a life so full and stable that the people who tried to break you no longer have a role in it. Forgiveness does not require reunion. Closure does not require approval. Healing does not require forgetting. If you are listening to this and see yourself in any part of my story, know this: walking away can be an act of strength. Choosing peace can be an act of defiance. Living well, with clear boundaries and self-respect, is often the most powerful form of revenge there is. If this story stayed with you, share what resonated. Stay here if you want to hear more stories about survival, boundaries, and choosing yourself when no one else did.